Save me about 50 minutes of time if that thing works. Okay, so in terms of exam prep, like I said, there's the numbers right there, 39 and 4 short essay. So we talked about marketing research, and the main thing there was, remember the parallels are to the social sciences. You know, a lot of, in fact, if you move on and you do dissertation or something like that, it'll be more intense, but the same principles are there. And the fact that you identify the problem, you make sure that there's a gap in knowledge, because if there's no gap in knowledge, if somebody's already answered these questions, then you don't try and answer them again. You know, so that encompasses the literature review, and then the research methodology, whether you go quantitative or qualitative. Anyway, all the parallels are there, and they come from the social sciences. We also talked a little bit about in marketing research, when you're trying to identify questions. Let's say you're the position of, say, Tide compared to, I don't know, some off-brand detergent. They may all be made by Procter & Gamble or Unilever or whatever. They may be even within the same company, but there's established positions that we all know, and that the brands, it's part of the branding that they occupy, and it's based upon perception. So that perceptual mapping is the concept of where the Yes detergent versus the Tide fits. And so that's a fairly important concept, and that's how that's identified. We also talked about some of the unethical things that are done in marketing in terms of like curb-stoning. Curb-stoning means literally it's derived from somebody sitting on a curbstone and faking surveys. So, kind of a unique term. Probably a good term to know. If somebody's talking about this survey appears to be curbstone, that means that it was a whole lot easier just to fill it out on our own rather than do it. It was interesting at this marketing conference. These guys had no quick solutions to, they just kind of bury their head in the sand. They're still saying, they're still talking about basically doing robocalls and all this other stuff, and their data that they've mined from all these online surveys, and they weren't really questioning the validity of those surveys and how that data was obtained, and the fact that ad blockers and the rest of it are changing the way the world operates, primarily due to their own fault. Some of the marketing research that's been done inappropriately, and that brings us to a couple terms too. There's sugging and frugging. You're like, well, what does that mean? I mean, but it's almost an acronym. Sugging means basically selling something under the guise of marketing. So a marketing study where, we're trying to get your opinion on whatever. Next thing you know, they're really just trying to sell you a timeshare. And frugging is the same sort of thing where we're trying to get your opinion on something, but really we want you to donate to our cause. Fundraising. So frugging is the fundraising part, and the sugging is the selling part. So again, both of them are not nice terms, not nice practices, and it's led to basically these devices that will gatekeeper type devices, either caller ID or people just not responding to surveys, or people filtering and not allowing you to get good information. If you are going to do something in a survey where it might be a bit misleading or whatever, you don't want to let that deception exist. And that's where, if any of that is taking place, if you're asking somebody to try and get to the true feeling, but you're trying to deceive them a little bit, there's always a debriefing that would have to take place afterwards, ethically, to inform that person that there was something else going on. So we also talked about different means of getting data. So if you're getting primary data, primary data means it's directly current and related to what you're doing. You know, it's data that's purposely being collected to answer your specific research question. So it's not like a big data type solution. If the information's out there and already available, then that would be secondary data. You also have internal and external secondary data. If it's like sales receipts from your organization, well, that would probably, well, not probably, that would be internal secondary data. If it's government data, well, external to your organization, unless you are the government, but for most cases, that would be external secondary. We talked about what a literature review is. You know, again, it's an analysis of what's already out there, what's already been done in the field of study. Yep. How do you before you use secondary data, you need to make sure that it's relevant to your study. I mean, there may be a bunch of information out there, but you need to know a little bit about how that data was collected and whether it's relevant. So, that it's consistent with what you're trying to do. The reason why you want to use secondary data is because it's cheap and it's typically very easy to get. Primary data is not always the best solution. It's more than likely going to be the most expensive and also the one that's going to take the longest to compile. You might be able, and that's, again, getting back to the power of big data, is that is secondary data that already exists out there. And a crude collection of secondary data can only be used for quantitative type things where you don't get a lot of insight, a lot of in-depth indications from that study. But if it's done well and with better and more probing analytics, you can actually start to answer some in-depth questions and get more of a qualitative realm to it. Qualitative is if you're doing a qualitative study, remember that's like the in-depth questions, just a few participants. It's tough to generalize over a huge sample, but for that specific group, you're trying to get to the absolute root of what's going on in that area. So we talked about sales. There's also companies, and believe me, I ran into a few of these this last week. Teradata. This guy's telling me about their data samples of 300 million. It's like, oh my God! I mean, we're talking big numbers. And they are a data syndicator. They will sell data, and we saw that too on some of these survey things that are out there on the internet. They're kind of a hybrid there, where you're actually buying respondents, you're buying a sample, and you're buying all sorts of things. So that syndication is getting more and more widespread. But syndicated data is stuff that's basically collected and sold by firms that deal in that. That is their business. They're in the data collection business, and again, back in Boston, they were big on selling that data. But again, I don't know. I mean, these people are professionals, and they majority of the people in attendance at this conference were, fairly well-to-do. To be a member of the Digital Marketing Association, it depends on the scale of your firm, but the going in is $1,500, and so above that, the conference itself was, started at about $500. So these guys are just not tourists, just walking in to see what's going on in marketing. They cut me a break because I was from the university and all, but I was one of the few academic type people there. Most of these people were professional marketers, but for some of the folks, I was just kind of dismayed. It seemed like they don't want to admit what is changing out there in the market. Some more basic research terms, variable, observable items are used to measure on a questionnaire. So, variables are the things that you manipulate to test your research. And constructs are related to that. Constructs are other things that are, the view of say, the friendliness of your restaurant, or the quality of food, or whatever. Those are the things that are would fall in the construct category. And what you're looking for is, when you're manipulating variables and you're trying to see what impact that has, is really what you're trying to do is you're trying to find relationships. So, this gets back to the basic research where you have a hypothesis, you have a intuition or whatever it's based on, a theory that this is the way things operate, and you're trying to prove or disprove that hypothesis. Again, you're not trying to bias it, you're trying to do this objectively, but one thing you need to determine is whether the null hypothesis exists, which the null hypothesis would be that there's no relationship between this data. If you look at the respondents, there's just on a scatter diagram, it's just a big circle. There's no line. There's no correspondence. Statistically, there's no correlation. If there is a correlation, then there's an alternate hypothesis. So the alternate hypothesis doesn't say that necessarily that your hypothesis is correct, but what it does say is that there is a correlation between the two items. So we talked about relationships. We talked about the independent variable, the one that you're changing. We've also talked about different types of research. You have exploratory and descriptive research. Exploratory is when you're kind of in a wide open situation. The literature review, nobody's kind of done this before, and so you're trying to explain this situation. You're trying to add knowledge. There's a gap out there in the knowledge that you're trying to fill. Technically, the whole hypothesis, empirically testable through unproven statement developed in order to explain phenomena. So, that's a hypothesis is your theory that's going to explain the phenomena. So a null, hypothesis that is tested for possible rejection under the assumption that it is true. So if the null hypothesis is true, that means there's no relationship, and it means that your hypothesis is false. And the alternative hypothesis means, there is some relationship. So, we talked about what primary data was violated. It's tough to overcome. Now, there's all sorts of ways. Like I say, I'm not a survey taker, but the one that had the $20 check with it, I did that. The Nielsen one, I did that. So, again, that's not unethical to provide incentives. People who go to Starbucks and respond to this, respond to that, and get free this or free that, again, they want respondents, and so it's not necessarily doesn't ruin the survey. I just got one from MTA. If I fill out their survey, I'll get 100 gigabytes. That's that's worth it. Okay, I'll do that. You know what I mean? So somebody calling me out of the blue and just wanting information, and I hate to say it, but our time everybody's time is valuable, and kind of what's in it for me is. So what I'm saying is that they aren't necessarily violating the scientific construct. Obviously, probably would not do that for a doctoral, dissertation type survey. But in marketing, it's incentives and providing some Scooby, some feedback to the respondents is almost becoming a standard. It's going to have to be. There's so few responses to many surveys. Again, at this conference, they were pushing basically the robocall technology and the direct mailing. Just the again, the pejorative is junk mail. So again, the expense when you're sending out so many surveys, so many marketing attempts, and a lot of it's just ending up in the trash, is just, it's scary. Things have got to change. Descriptive, so we talked about exploratory research, descriptive research. That's more focused. Now you're describing the situation, providing answers and questions, answers to the research questions. So it's more than just an exploration. Quantitative methods. You can end up in these hybrid type situations, but characteristics of quantitative type surveys are, formal questions, not open-ended, not like some fill-in-the-blank. No, it's going to be a tick in the block, and it's going to be something that's going to be tabulated quite easily, probably automated, and because there's going to be so many folks in it, large numbers of respondents, so different than qualitative. Yep. Also, quantitative research or descriptive and causal designs. You're trying to explain a situation, not an in-depth problem, but you're trying to show, smokers have cancer, and so you don't have to do an inverse or in-depth study for that. What you need to do is collect the incidence of people with lung cancer, the incidence of people with smoking. The larger sample, the better, and you make that. You figure out whether that hypothesis exists or not. So that's the type of thing you would do with a quantitative study. Also, we'll talk a little bit about sampling methods. Random samples are one thing, but typically, let's say you're at Alyeska and you want to know what, again, snowboarders are thinking or something like that. You're not going to go to the public because they possess attributes that are interesting to you, that are relevant to you. So, other disadvantages associated with quantitative studies. They're not going to give you that in-depth data. You may be able to find some sort of relationship, but if you want to know the root cause, that's not where they go on a quantitative study. Other type things, when we're talking about sampling, we're talking about people, maybe for ease of sampling, you go to a mall and you're catching people in the mall. Is that representative? No, it's representative of people who go to a mall. But if you're trying to generalize that over, the whole, let's say the Anchorage Bowl, and you've got one question, so you ask people at the mall, well, no, you're getting people who frequent that one mall who might fit a demographic that's probably, I'm not sure who the demographic of your average mall customer is, but I don't think I'm one of them. And, it depends what's going on. Probably a younger, probably, I would guess, I don't want to stereotype, but I would guess more female than male oriented, but who knows? But anyway, it's not random, is what I'm saying. So it's a convenient sample to get, but it's not the easiest sample. Remember, because we talked about snowballing. Snowballing means you ask one person, hey, and what's your friend think? Well, now you're getting even more neck down. You're getting people that have some sort of relationship. So that's called snowballing. Disadvantages associated with quantitative survey. We talked about in-depth data. We also talked about topic sensitivity. Like, let's say you want to find out how charitable people are. And I'm doing face-to-face interviews, asking people how much they give to charity on an annual basis. What do you think is going to happen? There are going to be some charitable people. Oh, yeah, I give big. I mean, go figure. Or we talked about asking kids whether they smoke pot or not, or asking kids whether they have teenage sex or it's almost pointless doing that survey, because you asking the survey people are not probably going to give you an accurate answer. Getting back to the charitable one, that's fairly straightforward. Most people are going to tend to go probably on the high side. Very few people are saying, no, I never give to anybody. I'm greedy and stingy. I mean, that's just the perception. So that's going to be a problem. Socially acceptable answers are what it might drive. Talked about independent variables. They're the ones that are typically manipulated by the researcher. Dependent ones are the other. We talked about validity in a study, in a sample. If it's externally valid, that means that it can be expanded. It's going to be representative. Your sample is representative of the larger population. There's also different sample methods. The non-probability samples and probability type samples. Example of a non-probability sample, and it might be a valid technique for the limited use that you have for it, but that would be, again, that snowballing, where that's not a very scientific approach to, get references from one friend to another friend and then come up with a sample on that. If you're going to go through and you're going to do a survey, but let's say we're doing this college survey, and we want to make sure that we get from all the different groups, and so we split the group and we split the students into freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors. We that's called stratified sampling. Anyway, you want to make sure that all these groups are representative. So is it random? It's straying from random, but it might be the most reasonable way to proceed on that. Also, be aware of the type of data you collect is going to limit what you can do in terms of statistically with calculations and stuff. For example, if people, you're asking whether male or female, a question like that, that's what's known as nominal data. There is no, well, our average was 1.5. That's meaningless. It's a binary situation. They're either male, they're either female. So can you do an average? No. So it means right out. Can you do a mode? Yes. What's the most often? So you can do it like that. But anyway, just make sure you know what you can do with the data you've got. See else. Talked about screening questions when you're doing a questionnaire. Do you go out to eat more than 3 times a month? Well, if the person doesn't go out to eat more than 3 times a month, they're probably not the one for your survey based upon restaurants. I mean, that may be your criteria. So that may be the end of the survey for that person. But anyway, you want to make sure that the person, again, do you ski? No. Well, the rest of your responses to my survey regarding Alyeska are probably meaningless. So anyway, you typically have a screening question in there to prevent unqualified, people unqualified in the means of taking your questionnaire or completing your questionnaire. In terms of information, the quantitative data is a little bit more straightforward. There's not a lot of induction required. Whereas qualitative data, it's about induction. You do the member checking business too, where you share your sort of analysis of what they said, and is this really your feeling on this matter, and it's a very interactive type process, iterative type process as well. But you would provide that data. So we talked about nominal data. Yeah, can you use means? No. Median? No. But mode? Yes. And standard deviation, variance, all those things are, when you're limited to nominal data, you're limited greatly on what you can do with it. We beat kind of hypotheses to death. Hypothesize. Anyway, hypothesis to death. If you're looking at relationships, if you're plotting it out, and you see a big circle, like I said, with the data points, you can, graphically say, okay, yeah, there's no relationship here. There's no line. It's not inversely proportional or inversely correlated or positive correlation. So you can derive a lot just by looking at that. You can decide. In that case, you would probably accept the null hypothesis. If you have data that varies over time, there's a relationship, but it varies in one way or another in terms of the rate. What's that going to look like in terms of a depiction? It's going to not be a straight line. It's not going to be linear. It's probably going to have a curve to it. So there can still be a correlation, but it'll likely be curvilinear. What else? I mean, that's kind of the flavor of the multiple choice questions. I don't think there's not going to be any lists or any of that kind of stuff. It should be pretty straightforward, but you will have to know, and it'll probably serve you well later, especially if you're going to do any research type methods or be able to evaluate studies. You'll be able to, be a little bit more informed because you'll know a little bit more about basic research methodology. And if somebody is trying to get accurate, good results from a marketing research study, it should follow a scientific method, like we said. In terms of some of the essay type things, there'll be some things related to what the point of a literature review would be. More stuff on null and alternative hypothesis. What you're looking for in terms of correlation with those. Same stuff with primary and secondary data, and you could get some bonus points by explaining internal versus external. Not a great leap, but being able to quantify data like that, being able to know a little about that, and then just a little bit about different types of surveying methods, what the characteristics and what the advantages of different methods would be, especially like online types. Any questions on the survey type stuff? Or not survey, but the exam itself. Yes.
Do we get notes?
No. No, and if you've ever taken, I assume just about everybody here has taken an exam on Blackboard, right? They tend to crump if you stray off pages, but we'll take it in here in class. So that's the other thing too. Just because it's on Blackboard, don't worry, you'll see it out there. But I'll have a password for it, and I won't issue the password or even make it visible until class time. If we get in a scrape somehow, and who knows, it's a few weeks out. So if there's some care to sit here and watch me talk or listen to it, but what we just did was